Downing Street said this morning that the Prime Minister will approach the Brexit negotiations in a constructive manner and with huge amounts of goodwill. The comments follow the ruckus over the leaked account of last week's Downing Street dinner attended by Mrs May and senior EU officials. As it happens, the row coincides with a visit to London by Yanis Varoufakis, the former Greek finance minister, to publicise a book called Adults in the Room, My Battle with Europe's Deep Establishment. He, of course, led the Greek side during the negotiations over his country's debt crisis, and I asked him whether what we've learnt about last week's encounter rang true in light of his experience of dealing with the EU.
Nothing was more predictable than this kind of clash. The substantial policy and tactic of Brussels politicians and bureaucrats of effectively stalling and constantly shifting the goalposts in any such negotiation.
What about the technique of leaking it all, which appears to have come from Brussels too?
Well, I do not believe that there has been a politician in the last few years who has been subject to toxic leaks more than I was when I was negotiating on behalf of Greece. So I'm utterly familiar with this tactic.
So you're not surprised by any of this. This matches the vision of the European Union you came to when you were involved in your own negotiations.
Well, since the 23rd of June 2016 Brexit referendum outcome, I have been warning the government that any attempt to engage in mutually advantageous negotiations is going to be defeated by the reality in Brussels. This is why I have been advocating a Norway-style agreement for a period of 5 to 6, 7 years to create a degree of continuity, to honour the Brexit outcome, while at the same time simply making it impossible for Merkel, for Juncker, for Dr. Schäuble to use those tricks and those tactics.
Well, that probably isn't going to be adopted by the British government. If they're not going to do that, what would you advise them in terms of the techniques that they should use to deal with Brussels?
The only alternative is a very hard Brexit that will be calamitous for Britain and detrimental to the European Union. Unfortunately, there is no tactic that would work to elicit from Brussels the rational approach to these matters. In my experience, the way in which they crushed our government and our very, very moderate proposals, leaking that there were no proposals, undermining the process of negotiation. In the end, Europe suffered massively from what they did to Greece in 2015. They are perfectly capable of repeating this experience, of inflicting major damage upon Britain and upon themselves, only in order to maintain this very peculiar pattern of power within Brussels.
Britain is a bigger economy than Greece. Have they got, or the British government got, a chance of winning if they stand up to the sorts of tactics that you're talking about?
Not within the 2 years that Article 50's triggering allows for. There's going to be insistence by Brussels, by Juncker and everyone else on sequencing, sorting out first the divorce terms, negotiating the total bill that London will have to pay, and only then beginning to discuss all the matters that London really wants to discuss, like a free trade agreement. This sequencing is going to make it impossible to do that which rational negotiators should do, which is to trade off how much money Britain pays to the European Union with good terms for free trade afterwards.
Well, one of the things that seems to have upset Mr Juncker is the fact that the British government apparently is not willing to accept that sequencing that you talk about, and that's what led him to say that Theresa May was deluded. I suppose, is he right about that? I mean, do you think that there is no chance at all of changing the sequencing?
There is no doubt in my mind that Mr Juncker is not annoyed. This is fake annoyance. This is a pretense of being annoyed. This is the strategy of subterfuge, the strategy of what I call the Swedish national anthem. When you talk to these people, whatever you say, however sensible it might be, it is as if you have been singing the Swedish national anthem to them. They will react in a prefabricated manner. They will have a playbook from which they draw their behavior, their mannerisms. It's a dialogue of the deaf, really.
Yanis Varoufakis.